What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are back in the first Sunday of May. I'm totally trying to avoid using that meme like the "It's gonna be May."
Yeah,
Which
Justin
is
Timberlake. NSYNC.
NSYNC.
Yeah, I heard it on April 30th. That's when you usually hear it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
My daughter sent it to me like 3 times, thinking it was the funniest thing she's ever seen.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, I've been living in this one for 10 years now.
Yeah, so today is, though, May the 4th. We're recording this on Sunday.
That's right.
So, we had May the 4th be with you. And
That was a really fun intro.
Yeah, it was. I actually had some, I'm on some clergy groups, and there were people that were like writing whole liturgies around that. I was like, that seems a little gimmicky.
Yeah.
So, but that was enough for us to have a laugh about it.
Does that prove like how kind of nerdy the pastors are? Or is it just a certain group of them? Because I feel like every pastor I know has really liked Star Wars.
I really like Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't trust people who don't like Star Wars.
Ooh, I like Star Wars, but I was going to get into like, should we talk about Star Trek versus Star Wars? But I think we don't have enough time on this podcast for that.
No, okay, that stuff. We probably need to do our podcast now.
Like get into it?
Yeah. Have we had our little break yet?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Roll it.
You know why I like recording these on Sunday?
Why?
Nick? Because I feel like the little banter that we have, particularly talking about like what you do in the weekend stuff, is very authentic because we haven't seen each other over the weekend.
That's true.
So when we do it on Tuesday, like I know what you've done.
Yeah, we've seen each other for 2 or 3
Just
days.
had lunch or something
like
when we have it. So yeah. So how was your weekend?
Weekend's been good. We had volleyball yesterday, and we actually were scheduled for like a 10 o'clock game and a 2 o'clock game. So we had a lot of time in between. So we kind of, we were going to picnic, but it was like downpouring in the morning. So we just hung out and good times. We went 1-1 as a crew. Our younger team won, our older team lost, but it's playoff week.
Yeah.
So it's going to be real.
It's going down
real
to the end
emotional.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Hopefully it'll be fine. I find youth sports. It's been a while since my kids have been in youth sports. I mean, they were in it in the fall, but like as I've kind of watched, it really is amazing being a coach in some of these things, but and trying to find that balance of like, how much do I want the kids to win and feel successful in that way, but how much am I really trying to just teach fundamentals and pour into the kids to give them joy and hope in what they're doing as well. You know what I mean? There feels like there's that weird balance and stuff like that. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed coaching.
I have mixed feelings. I mean, my kids are, grown now, but through their years in sports, I did appreciate like every kid getting a chance to play. It's. I know some coaches that like, is there a role that every kid has to play, like in baseball?
Yeah. There's supposed to be a sub out rule where every kid gets a chance to be on the field.
At least plays like 3 innings or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that says it should be because I mean it's part of growth. I do think, and we went through this whole thing with like not to go down this too far, but like the Upwards program that we had here, and we have switched to another.
Yeah, East Cherokee Soccer.
Still Christian based.
Yep.
So but like I do think winning and losing is a part of life and important lessons for kids to learn.
I agree, and that's actually something I tell the kids is like it's important to know how to be good sports and to win well, but it's also important to learn how to lose gracefully and push through. To me that's almost more life lesson stuff than winning everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
And that may be a good transition because, there's difficulties that come in life. You're not always going to win. Things aren't always going to go good. So that's probably a good transition into our sermon. So I did start a new message series called Faith Works, and which is go through the month of May. It's similar material that I've taught at different times, but not exactly the way that I'm approaching it this time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the book of James in there. I've actually done a sermon series on the book of James. I don't think I've done one here, but there is, but approaching it from this, how do we bear fruit? How do we grow and mature as a Christian?
Yeah.
How do we make our faith work? And what does faith look like when it works?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of our approach. And today we looked at when life goes hard,
Yeah.
when you lose the game, And the example I started off with, and I don't know if you ever had this experience, but you're driving down the road or you're in a parking lot and you are obeying all the rules and being very careful, and somebody not paying attention rear ends you.
Yep.
Not your fault, but suddenly your day is disrupted, or some could say ruined.
Yep.
My son, he worked and saved money, and I think we paid some, but he paid for at least half of his first car.
Yeah.
And then he's a very careful person. He looked and found the car he wanted, and it was a Mazda 626. Remember those? They still make them. Mazda 626 is a beautiful car.
Yeah.
It was used, but it was So he got it, and it was coming up. He was going to get his driver's license. I was driving it the day before he was going to get his driver's license.
Yeah.
And we were right in front of the McDonald's on Johnson Ferry Road, and somebody in a big old SUV came plowing right into us.
That's the worst.
Totally. I felt so terrible, but it wasn't.
It wasn't your fault.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the point.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of the struggles and things that we go through in life, the trials, if we use that word, are when we go through them, lots of times it's not of our own doing. It can be of our own doing. We make bad decisions. We're not perfect, but a lot of things that life throws at us are not of our own doing. So what do we happen when life gets hard? When we get the bad doctor's report? When we've got a terrible work situation? When things get heated up? When we go through the storms of life? And so that's where we began, because I think that's a good place. So how does God do that? And to me, this whole series is sort of where we stress the grace of God. And as we should,
Sure, yeah.
all the time and a lot, but where does human response overlap in that?
Yeah.
Yes, God offers us this grace for free, but if we're going to grow as Christians, there is human effort and human response. I think part of the sermon bumper talked about, God, we plant the seeds, God causes water, but God causes the growth.
Right.
So how does that happen? And so James jumps right in there right from the beginning, and actually I'll read a little bit of that because I've got it in front of me. He says this pretty famous scripture. It shows up on, little knit things or posters and stuff, memes. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So consider pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of any kind. Really?
Yeah, no.
Really? I don't know anybody who gets reared and says, "Oh, goody, I'm facing trials."
Let's do this trial
So we
today.
have to really look at how we're using the word joy there.
Yeah.
Because we so connect joy with happiness, and it's an appropriate way. It's used that way. But lots of times, the biblical joy, when we talk about the joy of the Lord, is a different kind of joy. It's kind of a peace and understanding. There's a faithfulness that's involved in that. And so, this isn't joy for the trial. This is joy in the trial. And I think there is sort of a mindset that if we can switch in our minds that when we're going through this, that it's a time to lean into our faith, because God doesn't, and I'm probably overemphasize this, God doesn't cause the trial.
Yeah.
I know some theological stripes of people say that God is causing the trial. God doesn't cause the trial, but he certainly uses the trials to help us grow up as Christians,
right?
And that perseverance.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the what do you say, being molded and shaped a little bit, right? Because I think it's in these trials Just like I was talking about losses earlier. Like, I think it's in those things that you really have to kind of take an assessment and look at what's going on a little bit to kind of shift. And maybe things are needing to be a change of focus. But as you said, not everything is our fault. And I think sometimes we want to blame it on, like we need to blame it on something. So we internalize that a lot instead of looking at it and going, how is God trying to grow me in this space?
Yeah. So years ago, I'm talking like 25, 30 years ago, Amy Grant, so this is how old it had this song, We Believe in God. And we actually used it in the service I was doing. We actually sang it a lot in connection with the Apostles' Creed. We believe in God. But the hook on that, the line is, we believe in God and we all need Jesus because life is hard and it might not get easier. And that is true. Life is hard. Difficulties aren't going to, I think sometimes we feel like the Christian faith is going to spare us from all that, but we are going to go through difficulties. But in our belief in God and our faith works, God can use those difficulties to shape us and to create something beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, all the slides and everything for the series, there's a lot of fruit on there because we will come back each week to where is faith, what are the works of our faith? And one of those things is the fruit of the Spirit that comes out of that the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5 is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so if we're never tested in that, how are we going to ever grow in that?
Yeah.
If we never have to have somebody that tests our patience, how are we ever going to become a more patient person?
Yeah.
If we don't ever, Jesus said to love your neighbor as you love yourself and to love your enemy. And so if we're never tested in that, if that never comes up, how are we ever going to develop those spiritual muscles to bear that fruit?
Yeah. And kind of you mentioned your video earlier about how it was talking about kind of watering and stuff like that. And it really actually, like, as I was listening to you preach this, the thoughts that kept coming in my head are watching people who have like those master green thumbs, who can work and grow things, because they do a lot of work to make sure the soil is primed for growth. They do a lot of the watering. They get the food for the stuff. They know how to use fruits and stuff to the advantage. They know all the ways to make sure they're growing the thing and making that part. And I think a lot of times when it comes to our own spiritual growth, sometimes we just don't do the work on our side. We just live in whatever that moment is and go, this was good or this was bad, and kind of leave it there. But I think a lot of times, and maybe this is kind of what you're saying too, is just like, you have to do that work of finding where am I supposed to be growing in this?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't for nothing. It might not have been caused by God, but this also can be used to learn from.
God definitely can use that.
Yeah.
And I thought, I like to think of myself as a pretty good patient person. You're a very patient person.
I try to be.
Yeah, I mean, I get tested in that sometimes, but but it hasn't come without perseverance.
Right.
I mean, there have been things that I've gone through where I was a lot less patient. And I think to switch the mindset was like, I want to grow. I want to be a more patient person. I want to be a kinder person. And so when we're facing those situations where it's not easy to do that, that's where we can really lean in our faith and say, God, help me here.
Yeah, how do I show kindness
I am
to this
on my
person?
last nerve with this person.
Yep.
You're going to have to help me through that we can grow. I actually used an example. I should have given you credit, but we used it. I think we were talking about Sabbath or something a while back about like where growth happens.
Right.
And the example of working out with weights.
Yeah.
Because I think that's such a good example is that like when you work out with weights, you're actually
tearing the muscle down.
Tearing the muscles, tearing the fibers in the muscles, and then they grow and we get stronger. And so faith, I think, works the same way. If we don't have resistance, it stays small and soft.
Mm-hmm.
But when we go through challenges, when we go through struggles and tensions, then it gets stretched and strained and eventually strong in those things. So, that's part of, I think, how we can grow in those struggles when they do come, because they will come.
Yeah. And I think approaching it like working out is an interesting way to look at it, because, at some ways it's how you're choosing to react to that resistance, right? Because I've been, especially, when I've worked out, there's been a couple times that like I've started, and when something got too heavy, it was just like, okay, I'm gonna go do something else, like to find ways that I can make it easy for myself. But it's truly in the times like when I've noticed, physical growth and muscle, but also just like in life, it's when I really lean into the situation, the hardship, and I push through it. Again, looking to find, what am I being taught in this situation?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to just going the easier route, because it's really easy to be like, yeah, I just went through that bad thing. I hope a good thing comes next, and not think about it again. But it's also, okay, what can I learn? Is it a financial hardship?
Yeah.
How, what can I set up? Or a physical illness? Is there something I could be doing in my health to prevent this from happening more, or whatever?
So yeah, and I think that's part of the human responsibility. You're talking about the master's gardeners, which is another good example of like knowing, like, it doesn't guarantee it, but it gives us its best chance of growing. And so when we learn that about ourselves with a kind of self-awareness of like, oh, this is going to be something, or it might be something like, this is something I need to avoid because I know this is a place I'm not super strong in, or my tendency is not to be patient. So therefore, let me try to mitigate with that a little bit, with what sort of environments I place myself in when.
Yeah.
And knowing like I'm tired right now. I haven't had any lunch. My blood sugar is crazy. So, I need to step off. I think that's part of the growth too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Of knowing how you'll react and how to best maybe show those fruits of the Spirit even more. But I also think, it's funny you said the word patience, because when I was going through youth group when I was younger, we always used to joke that we don't pray for the P word because we didn't want to be tested in our patience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think patience is especially one of those things that you kind of have to live in it and work through to really try it,
Yeah.
And you're going to fail at times.
I've done that. Like I'll be honest with you. And even today, if I think about it, I probably have fallen on this in the last 6 months or whatever. But like when I'm in like a really very poor customer service kind of situation, I used to really could be very curt and rude.
Yeah.
That like I can only take so much,
Right.
Somebody's gotten something wrong that I'm storming in demanding my rights. And I've really tried to replace those times with kindness and patience for the other person.
Yeah.
First of all, it's saying, I don't know what kind of day they're having or what's going on here. And sometimes they're just inept and terrible. But that's okay too. That should not make me have bad behavior because of that. So, we watch what happens today now because of that's happening.
Don't go to lunch. Go home.
but I do think there is this certain amount of awareness of where we're going to rub up against stuff. And when, of all those fruits, every one of them is, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, all of those things. They're all important.
Yeah.
And they're all things that can come under fire and we can walk through storms with. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that really is kind of putting a bow on it here, because a lot of this is.
Let me make one other point. I do have one other point, and I'll make it brief because
you're good.
Yeah,
take your time.
But I do think this idea of spiritual maturity, that it's not, the goal is not this. It's not a result of ease.
Yeah.
It is the result of perseverance, and I think where in our spiritual maturity is to realize those things, because I think life is a combination of good and bad. Mm-hmm. You're going to have bad things that are happening, and it's probably going to get better.
Yeah,
it's at some point. But if you haven't used that as an opportunity for growth, then nothing's been gained of it. And I think if we stay not to be patronizing, but it's stay in sort of an immature baby Christian kind of way where everything is about us and what God is doing for us, and and not see the human response in it, then we're never going to take advantage to grow and fully be what Christ intended. So therefore, when we go through the storms, it is a shift in attitude.
Yeah.
You're not going to be spared from the storms of life. They're going to happen. And, I use the example of a lighthouse. For whatever reason, it's a great Christian example. We see it on posters and stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But lighthouses aren't needed on those calm days, calm sunny days. We don't need them. It's only in the storms of life that we need that light and need to know where that light is coming from. So if you go through that, don't assume that you're weak in your faith. Assume that your faith is being formed.
Yeah.
And try to find God in that storm, because God is there in the storm. It may not be the way that you want it to be, or you imagined it would be, but God is there at work in those storms. Yeah.
So I like the lighthouse imagery, and you're right. It's used at dark. It's used in the storms. If you're somebody going through a hard time or a situation, how do you help people, or what can they do to make sure that they're kind of orienting to the right place?
I think confession is one of the things. It is to admit it. Like lots of times we paint this face on when we come into church or into a Christian situation or everything. It's okay to say, I'm going through a really struggle right now. I'm having trouble seeing where God is in all of this. I think, and that's why the community is so important. Mm-hmm. And for us to be honest and not judgmental one another. And the thing is, what we think people are going to judge us for, they usually aren't. Yeah. Most people are going to welcome the vulnerability and the authenticity in those moments. Maybe you have been judged in the past, but I think for the large part, mostly here, I'm not aware of. You're going to find a community that will love and support and pray for you and help you find the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you were?
I think that answers the question, and that's what I would have said is something along the lines. Find if it's not a group of people, find that one person that you trust to be just authentic with you, and that person might be somebody who would be the first person at your door to celebrate a win, but also that person who's not afraid to say like, "Hey, we really need to talk through this or work through this," to come beside you in a way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and it might be enough. As a first step, there's probably, it depends on the situation for the first step, but it may be just taking a beat and recognizing, giving yourself some grace, knowing God's giving you grace, and you might have to bench yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're out there and you're trying to play, in the heat of the moment, and you're exhausted, and the emotions and physical being are not where they should be, maybe take a beat and breath and give yourself some grace and sit back in that for a while. And I think then you can find, begin to see the answers, whether it's not seeking out a friend or a community or, just taking a weekend off or taking a vacation, to get your mind about finding where God is at work in it all.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
very good. Well, Dave, as we are here wrapping up, is there anything coming up that you'd like to?
Well, next Sunday's going to be great. It's Mother's Day next week, so this is a heads up to all you men out there.
Reminder.
A reminder.
Get the flowers.
You got. By the time you get this,
in bed.
This will come out on Wednesday, so you've got just
You'll have a couple days.
Yeah. And
might not be time for that Amazon order, though.
I think you and I have at least talked about this personally. I don't think we ever talked about it on the podcast, but what I discovered early in my marriage was, it doesn't matter what I get for Teresa on days like that, Valentine's Day, birthday, Mother's Day. It does not matter what I get for her, and how expensive or extravagant it might be if it's bought on the day.
Yeah.
If I wake up in the morning and I don't have it, you're done.
You
know what I'm saying?
You're cooked.
It's and it really, for her, it really doesn't matter what it is as long as I've had the effort and thought about it
and
had it ready. Yeah. So just a wisdom of somebody's been married for a long time. Don't think you're going to go
Wise
out.
sage words.
You're not going to run to Publix and pick up flowers on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Do it on Saturday.
Yeah. Do it on Saturday. Make sure it's there when they wake up.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of breakfast in bed. You'll be good to go.
Yeah.
But, all right. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. If there's any comments, anything you'd like to add to our conversation, drop it in the comment section below on the Facebook, the YouTube. But without any further ado, we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah. God bless.